Good morning. Welcome back to the Practically Perfect Home Improvement Show. Excuse me if I'm a little shaky this morning. I'm just off a 2-week vacation out in Alaska. If we get a second here, we'll talk a little bit about that. I got a very special guest, actually 2 special guests here in the studio this morning coming up, so stick around for that. Robert and Shana Adams from Wavering Place. Back after 2 weeks. So first show here after vacation and trying to get back in the swing of things. Hope you're having a great summer. Hope you're staying cool out there. It's a little tough to come back from 71 degrees and sunny in Alaska, and that's the high, to I think it was 97 degrees when I landed in Columbia and walked across the tarmac. We were actually diverted in from Charlotte, so they kind of just dropped us off right there, rolled up a ladder, and kind of a rude awakening back into Columbia. But glad to be back either way, and glad to be back with you, and I appreciate you joining us. If it's your first time joining us, I want to tell you a little bit about what this show is about. This show is for people who are interested in home improvement, community improvement. If you're a DIYer or your favorite tool is a checkbook, we want to connect you with good quality vendors and craftspeople and let you know some things that are going on here in the Midlands to make our homes a little bit more comfortable, a little more beautiful, but also improve our communities as a whole. If you've got a question, the number is 799-8255, 799-TALK, and as always, the phone lines are always open throughout the hour, even when we've got our guest. If you've got a question for them, get on board and give us a shout. We want to promote home, neighborhood, and community improvement at a local level, and again, that involves all sorts of different aspects of that. And today we're talking about a historical property here in the Midlands called Wavering Place, and we want to talk with our guest, Robert and Shana Adams. Good morning. How are y'all doing?
Good morning. We're well.
Good morning. We're glad to be here. Thank you, Ryan.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate y'all coming in. When I first started the show, and I started thinking about what types of people I wanted to have as guests, I knew I was going to have some sponsors coming in, some people who are fellow tradespeople like myself, but I also wanted to talk with some folks who maybe aren't in the trades, but are people who own a home or a property that requires a lot of maintenance and a lot of attention to detail. And you tell us briefly a little bit, just give us a snapshot of what is Wavering Place.
Well, Wavering Place is a 400-acre plantation in Lower Richland County. It's been in some branch of our family since 1766.
Wow.
Shana and I own it with my brother Weston and his wife Lisa.
Okay.
We bought it from Uncle Julian Adams 4 years ago. He owned it for about 25 years prior to that and did a lot of good work. And we're trying to be good stewards of Wavering Place just like he was.
Sure. So why would you buy a piece of property like this? Sounds like a lot of work.
Well, it is a lot of work, and Shana, you feel free to jump in anytime. She does a lot more of the work than I do. In fact, really, Shana and Lisa, my sister-in-law, are really the two main stars of the show at Wavering Place. I'm in a support role and kind of provide unskilled labor.
That's what I was reading.
Do whatever she tells me to do.
So what do you do? I was out there a few weeks ago. You had a big open house for one of your new buildings that I want to hear a little bit more about them. Y'all were giving some tours and that sort of thing, so I didn't have time to really corner you and find out about it, but I want to find out about that process. So what's a weekend like out there? I imagine you're sitting on a lawnmower and doing some weed eating. And
There's a lot of that,
yeah.
and Shana, of course, does. She is the point person for our business, which is an events business. The venue is a backdrop for weddings and other events like barbecues, oyster roasts, and weddings are a big part of it. And the building you were talking about, the Green Tree House, the new pavilion that was completed a few months ago, it replaces the need for a tent. These are outdoor events, and so we built this pavilion that will house up to 175 people, and it's a great addition to our events business.
Okay. Well, we swing the mic over there to Shana. I want to hear what was the reason. I was out there, and you've got obviously this big, beautiful house. I know you've got I think it's the kitchen house over there, and you've got several other outbuildings. What was the need for building another building over there?
Well, like Robert had said, that we needed a space. We needed a covered space for weddings and events. And so in addition to that, we had a couple of added bathrooms to it.
Okay.
But once, when Robert and I and Weston and Lisa purchased Wavering Place, we were kind of trying to come up with some ideas to help offset the cost of preservation.
Okay.
And so Robert and I were married at Wavering Place to be 10
Is that
years
right?
in October.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, when Uncle Julian owned Wavering Place, he was gracious enough to allow us to get married there, and that was 10 years ago, and we got married in the garden. And so
Wow.
I have a background in hospitality, so I said, why don't we just have weddings and events at Wavering Place and see how it goes. And so far, it's been very successful for us.
Amazing. I mean, just the photography on your website is amazing. And I grew up here. I don't know if you knew that in Lower Richland. I grew up out on the other side of Sumter Highway, a little neighborhood called Trotwood, and went to Hopkins Middle School. So I made a lot of trips back and forth on Lower Richland Boulevard out there and Air Base Road. I had a lot of friends that lived out that direction, but I never realized that Wavering Place was even there. I mean, maybe I drove past it or might have seen it out of the corner of my eye. Can you see it from?
You cannot see it from the road.
From the road.
So,
okay. That's what I thought. It's kind of got that old kind of driveway was that. How long is the driveway from the road?
Oh, about a half a mile,
Okay.
I would say. Adams Hayne Road is a dirt road,
Right.
and there's a sign out there that says Wavering Place.
Okay.
It's basically directly behind McIntyre, as you know.
Gotcha. Yep. Okay. Perfect. And what the name is it Green Tree House?
Green Tree House
Okay.
is the pavilion, and Green Tree was the name of at least a part of Wavering Place at one particular time, so that's where the name came from.
So the property at some point was divided, or it was?
It has been. At one point,
Okay.
it was much bigger than it is today.
Originally, how big?
I think at one time it was at least 2,500 acres.
Wow. I mean, that's just hard to even fathom. A single owner? I mean, one family owned?
Yes.
Wow. What can you give us some idea of where that would have run from? Some landmarks of would it go to the
Well, it would have been
River,
it would have been across Air Base Road,
Okay.
and then further. Our property line, Cedar Creek, is runs through our property, but
Okay.
the property line is just across Cedar Creek
Right.
on the Columbia side.
Okay.
And that upland property from there at one point was part of Wavering Place.
And for those who aren't familiar with where we're talking about, Air Base Road, that parallels Sumter Highway, correct?
Correct.
It runs from Lower Richland Boulevard to what's the eastern? Where does it end down there into?
I guess it ends at 601.
Okay. So that's a nice stretch of that's a nice stretch of road out there, so you've got this new property that you purchased, and you and your brother, I guess, went in together. So that's the first new owners in 25 years.
That's
you say?
right.
And Uncle Julian, this was his. This is a residence and was his primary residence for 25 years.
That's right.
And how do you live in a house like that? I mean, was it just him? Did he have a big family, or
he had his children there
Okay.
part time?
Okay.
And he had people working there
Okay.
who were out there.
imagine you'd have to have some help.
Yeah,
I mean,
and,
that's
and of course he was one adult taking responsibility for the whole place, where
Right.
we have four
Right.
with two couples. So we have frankly a lot more manpower or woman power at our disposal, which I think makes a difference.
Okay, we have just about a minute to go. I do want to let people know that if you've got questions, I have a ton of questions myself, just as somebody who's grown up and always loved these old homes, historical homes, whether it's down in Charleston or Savannah, that kind of area. But later in say like the past 10 years, I've started to realize that there's still a lot of these properties around the Hopkins area. I actually worked for Southern Way Catering and got to work some parties over at Adams Pond, which, reading on your website, actually that's related to your family as well. Is that right?
It is.
Okay.
It's owned now by Kirkman Finley,
Right.
and Jimmy Stevenson and Southern Way do all the events there. But it was Ned Adams,
Okay.
and then his son Stephen owned it. So
Okay.
yeah, there is definitely a family
So
connection.
distant relatives at some point, or I guess in those days everybody was related. around these parts.
Not too distant
Okay.
cousins.
Well, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back with Robert and Shana Adams from Wavering Place. You're listening to the Practically Perfect Home Improvement Show on The Point.
Our website is mobile friendly.
This magical technological age in which we live.
Load it now. MakeThePointRadio.com.
Hey, this is Ryan Parsons for my friend Dr. Kelly Hines with 20/20 Vision in 5 Points, the official eye care provider for the Practically Perfect Home Improvement Show. Dr. Hines is a licensed ophthalmologist, and her staff is ready to help you find that perfect pair of sunglasses. They carry brands like Maui Jim, Ray-Ban, Costa Del Mar, and more. She's also offering a special on anti-sweat Botox treatments just in time for the summer heat. See why they were voted best vision wear by the readers of Columbia Metropolitan Magazine. Across from the fountain in 5 Points, or call 748-9994.
This is Jeff Carstetter with Sunshades and Graphics. Do you have hot spots in your home or office? Are you concerned with your furnishings fading? Are you having trouble seeing your TV or computer monitor because of the glare from the sun? We can help with Vista Window Film. We will reduce the solar heat coming in your windows, the ultraviolet to protect your furnishings, and the glare so you can see your TV. Call us today and we will bring the showroom to you, or visit our website, sunshadesandgraphics.com. Call 798-2665. That's 798-COOL.
Do you notice musty smells coming from your fireplace? Do you have rust streaks coming down the outside of your chimney, or mildew or mold growth on the exterior surfaces? Do you hear constant dripping around your chimney when there's heavy rain outside? We can take care of that at Chim Spector Venting Specialists, where we fix leaky chimneys. Check us out on the web at www.chimneysweepcolumbia.com or give us a call at 803-602-5929. Again, that's Chim Spector Venting Specialists, 803-960-2139.
This is Fran Halloran, the Money Coach. Tune into my show on Thursday mornings from 9 to 10 for simple and practical financial coaching on The Point, 100.7 FM, 1470 AM, Columbia's local talk radio experience.
I'm Frankie Griffin, appraiser and real estate broker in charge of the Palmetto Success Team. The Palmetto Success Team is a true team of real estate professionals working together to make sure you have all the information you need to make an informed decision in your next real estate transaction. If you're thinking about buying, selling, or investing in real estate, I invite you to listen to the Success in Real Estate show every Friday morning from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. right here on The Point. For more information, go to www.frankiegriffin.com.
Columbia's local talk radio experience. The Point.
Now at 100.7 FM and 1470 AM.
Good morning. Welcome back to the Practically Perfect Home Improvement Show. Thanks again for joining us. If you've got a question for Robert and Shana about Wavering Place, please give us a call, 799-8255, 799-TALK. And let's get right back into it, Robert. I want to hear a little bit about some more of the history of Wavering Place. When was the house built out there?
The house was built in 1854. It's the second house on the property. A predecessor house was built between 1790 and 1800, and all the other buildings, the outbuildings or dependencies, which include a barn, the kitchen house, smokehouse, an overseer's office, and a double slave cabin date to 1790, 1800. And the house, the original house that was built during that time period, burned, and the second house, the present-day house, was built in 1854.
Do you happen to know anything about what started the fire? Or
No, we don't. I mean, we do know the location of the house. It was essentially in the same spot, a little over to the side of, if you're looking at the house from the front, the left side. But
any original footings or anything that you can see, bricks or?
There are a few bricks scattered around, but I think probably anything that was usable
was reused.
Yeah.
Okay. So the original house was 17?
Between 1790 and 1800, because that's the date of the other old buildings that still stand.
So a lot of that was built all right around the same time, within a few years.
Correct. The kitchen house, the brick kitchen house, would have been the first building, and probably the first occupied by the first family to live there.
My sister-in-law, Lisa, has a background in architecture and design, and when we purchased Wavering Place, that building, the kitchen house, needed some work, and so we also needed it to be a usable space.
Yeah.
And she did all the preservation work on that along with the contractor.
Right. I guess that comes in handy having a sister-in-law that
she could do just about anything. And we're all really hands-on. So she designed it in a way that it was usable. So we also have a bed and breakfast in the kitchen house, and also serves as a bridal suite, and has 2 bathrooms on the back end of it.
Okay. That's awesome. So you could rent that just for a long weekend or a
Correct.
nightly rental? Go out there?
Nightly rental or a couple of nights. And of course, she also designed the Green Tree House, the pavilion, and did a great job of that, and worked with a contractor from Camden, a fellow named Paul Hayes.
Okay.
Lee McCaskill, another guy from Camden, did the work on the kitchen house, and they both did very good work.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
And of course, Lisa deserves a lot of credit for doing a good job on both of those buildings.
Was that mimicked at all based on any of the other structures that were out there? Or was that sort of purpose built for what you needed for your event space?
Both, really.
Okay.
It was intended, of course, to do what we need the building to do, but it also needed to fit in with the other buildings, and I think she did a great job of making sure that it did.
Absolutely. It's good combination of some painted wood, I think, that's nice and bright, and then you've got some old reclaimed
some of
wood.
that salvage wood was from the old Congaree train depot that Uncle Julian bought 20 years ago, and we were able to salvage some of that wood and use it in the pavilion.
So did he move that depot in one piece to the property?
He did, and he hoped to utilize it, but it just never came to fruition.
Really?
But we were able to use some of the wood and still have more to use on future projects.
So it was at some point disassembled and the wood was salvaged
Correct.
at least? Okay.
Correct.
Even if it wasn't restored back to its original. Any idea what year that was, or what year was it built, and what year did he
I'm thinking it was a turn of the century building. I think it was probably moved to Wavering Place sometime in the 90s maybe.
Okay. Cool. I imagine there's a lot of that went on. If he saw something probably that he could use, in a place like that to grab it, and maybe one day you'll need it, and got plenty of room out there.
It's worked out because we've been able to use that wood, and we'll continue to be able to. So,
do you know what species of wood that is? Is it heart pine, yellow pine kind
I
of?
think there is some of that.
Okay.
The original buildings at Wavering Place, there's a lot of cypress utilized in those buildings, and because of that, it's helped those buildings survive so long.
Right. It helped me remember, I was reading something about you actually cut some trees on the property. Was that during the remodel on the kitchen house, or you were able to reclaim?
We've done some selective cutting, and I guess since Weston and I have owned it, we've done that one time. Uncle Julian did it maybe a couple of times over 25 years. There's a section of low-lying around Cedar Creek, old hardwood, even virgin timber in some sections that's never been logged. But we do really just selective cutting, sort of on the advice of the forester in the other tracts.
And then you mill that into lumber for something that you need?
We have.
Okay.
We have, yes.
Okay. I just think that it's got to be so expensive. Obviously, you've got a little income coming in from some weddings and some B&B. But what else can you do to cut down on taxes out there? I mean, this is.
Well, the main business is the events business,
right.
The weddings and other events, and then the B&B would be a secondary business. And really, the timber harvesting is very small in terms of what piece of the revenue stream it constitutes.
Okay.
And then tours are a little bit. We do a couple of tours a year in conjunction, typically at least, with Historic Columbia, at least one, sometimes two, and then do other small tour groups if people call ahead and schedule.
Right. So tell me a little bit about what type of conservation easements and that sort of thing you've done. Is that something that's been done since you've owned it, or? Uncle
Julian put a conservation easement when he owned Wavering Place. For most of the period he owned it, it was 267 acres.
Okay.
And then Weston and Julian and I bought a 135-acre tract that was contiguous to it that wraps around Grovewood Plantation, which is next door.
Okay.
And
you've got some family history.
We
there
do.
As well.
Our Adamses are descended from Joel Adams, who came to Lower Richland in 1766, and he married Grace Weston, the daughter of William Weston, and they lived at Grovewood, and they arrived simultaneously, essentially, with Joel in Lower Richland in either 1766 or 68. And so anybody in our Adams family is a Weston descendant because Joel's children all came from Grace.
Do the Westons still own Grovewood?
They do not. They did until fairly recently, maybe 25 years ago.
Okay.
And it is now owned by Brian and Mary Ellen Barnwell, who are great neighbors. We're glad to have them over there.
Okay. Are they related to the Barnwells of Barnwell of the town of
I
Barnwell?
think they are
somewhere along the way.
I think they are.
Okay, good. How about topography over there? I've seen just kind of the road in and then the grounds around the house. But what else goes on as you get a little further away from the house and the structures? What do you see? You mentioned the lowland areas.
We basically we're right about on the fall line where we are, and we've got having Cedar Creek running through the property, which is the biggest tributary feeding into the Congaree from that part of Richland County, is a great feature. We've got a lot of great hardwoods around the creek there,
right?
And then on the upper higher ground, the bluff overlooking Cedar Creek, we've got some isolated wetlands, Carolina bays. Okay. One of them is about a 10-acre pond that we like to hunt, so we hunt wood ducks there and hunt turkey and doves and deer and a lot of different things. So it's kind of a sportsman's paradise.
I was going to say it sounds like a piece of paradise. I'll figure out how I can join the family.
We'll have to get
join
you
the
out
club.
there
You
sometime.
selling memberships or?
No, we selfishly keep that for ourselves.
Okay, I don't blame you.
And our friends and guests.
Yeah. Any agriculture that still goes on at?
We do. We've got about half of the property is open agriculture.
Okay.
Fields, and we do still have a farming operation there. A guy named George Noble, who's a good guy and a neighbor, is a farmer, so we don't actually get out there and farm. We do.
I didn't know if you were heading there from here. You seem a little dressed up for tractor work.
Well, we get on a tractor to mow,
and
that's about it.
Okay.
George Noble handles the farming, but
what does he grow out there?
Right now he's got winter wheat and corn, and he plants cotton. And he's done other things from time to time, soybeans. He's a big potato farmer, but he's never done potatoes on our place.
Okay.
But right next door on a piece of property that one time was part of Wavering Place, he historically has done a lot of potato farming.
Gotcha. Okay, well, I want to get Shana back on the mic because this is, after all, is a home improvement show, and I'm really curious about the renovation process on that kitchen house. What kind of shape was it in when you got there? I'm curious what was Uncle Julian using it for when he was there, and then what kind of shape was it in, and how big of a project was it to turn it into what it is?
Well, originally, when Wavering Place was a working plantation, it was used as a kitchen house, so all the cooking was done there. Okay. So it was a brick kitchen house. And then after it stopped being a kitchen house, it was one time a doctor's office, and another doctor lived there at Wavering Place. And Robert, you have to remind me the name of the doctor that lived there.
Well, we had Adams Hayne, who was an interesting character. He was the first director of the Department of Health, what is now DHEC. In fact, He was the first state health officer in America, in any state.
Wow. What year are we talking on that?
He was the director of DHEC probably from the teens to the mid-40s. He was an infectious disease doctor trained at Johns Hopkins, and during that time, malaria and infectious diseases like that were a major health problem in states like South Carolina. And he was a significant guy in his field, and one of the most significant people in the history of Wavering Place.
Right. So you got this kind of been through several rounds of what it was actually used for.
Yeah.
Was there anything left inside as far as what?
Yeah, there was some rafters that were original, and there was a concrete floor in it, and it was poured in the 20s and 30s when that served as a doctor's office. When we were
it was originally maybe a wood frame floor when it was a kitchen house, you think?
I'm not quite sure, but I remember helping Lisa. We hand stained the floor, and I was on my hands and knees wiping up the stain, and I said, "There's chicken feet imprints all over this floor." So that was kind of a neat feature that I point out to people when we do a tour.
So while the concrete was still wet, chickens got
chickens got in there, and so our contractor had a big crack in the building, and so in order to stabilize it, we had our contractor make the strap that go around the building and has rods in it, kind of like those rods that you see in Charleston homes for earthquakes. And we put 2 bathrooms in it, and a closet, and and a little wet bar and a couple of benches and stuff.
Is that available for weddings as well? Or?
Yeah, it serves as a bridal suite.
Oh,
so it's an area for the bride and the bridesmaids to get ready.
Nice. I bet that is a nice feature.
Yeah, they love it.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure. And so, how many weekends a month would you say? Or is it mostly weekends you have it rented for B&B, or can you use it when there's a wedding, or how does that work?
Well, we don't ever try to do any kind of B&B during a wedding week. We only host a wedding a weekend and our wedding event a weekend on the weekends. So.
Let me jump in. I'm sorry. We're going into a break, but I want to continue. When we come back, you're listening to the Practically Perfect Home Improvement Show with Robert and Shana Adams. We'll be right back.
Moving and eating better every day can help make you and your kids healthier. Search We Can online to find out more. A message from the Ad Council, HHS, and NIH's We Can program.
Good morning. Welcome back. This is Ryan Parsons. You're listening to the Practically Perfect Home Improvement Show, along with my special guests, Robert and Shana Adams from Wavering Place out in Little Richland, South Carolina. And I apologize, Shana, we cut you off there going into the break, and now I can't even remember what we were talking about. So,
well, I was talking about there was a crack in the building, and so we needed to stabilize it and put that strap around it with those rods to kind of, and then we did the work on the inside.
Is that something that's visible at all?
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And our Lee McCaskill, our contractor, asked us if we wanted to paint it, but we really loved that rustic color, rusty kind of color. So, and it kind of blends in and put a new roof on the building, and just did a few feminine touches here and there. So
absolutely, it's definitely a nice addition. Well, the way that you're using it now, I think is just perfect, and it sits as a nice little backdrop back there. When you have weddings out there, are there several areas that you can do weddings, or is it you just kind of focus right in front of the house? I know I've seen some pictures of the.
Like I said, Robert and I were married in the garden, so that's a ceremony option.
How many people could you have in the garden?
In the garden, probably about 260.
Wow. Mm-hmm. We're talking about a big garden then.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then a couple of other options for ceremonies is either in front of the house underneath the live oak. There's a large live oak in the front of the house. Or at the end of the walkway, and receptions in the back typically, or you can have a reception on the front lawn. Use some cafe string lights and light up the house.
Do you provide all of that?
No, that's all outsourced.
Okay. So you have some vendors that you use to bring in all that. And what's the biggest wedding you've had at Wavering?
We had last March. We had about 280 people at Wavering Place, but next spring we'll have a very large wedding of 500 guests. Whoa. So that would be a first time for us, and we're really excited about that.
Somebody local or somebody?
Yeah, somebody local.
That's huge. I think Robin and I are having. We're hoping to keep it 150 or so.
That's what typically people want. The fathers of the brides want to keep the numbers low, and everybody else is trying to keep it up high.
Absolutely. I can't imagine shaking hands with 500 people and saying thank you for coming. I mean, that's a process in and of itself. To set up a receiving line, I guess, as people are coming in. That just seems like too much work for me, but sounds
a lot of fun.
Sounds cool for you to host a party that big.
It's a lot of fun.
One thing that I think we ought to mention briefly, the garden Uncle Julian put in during his time, and it is a fantastic garden. It's really it's a great formal garden. We were married under a big live oak that's a centerpiece of one end of the garden. But Uncle Julian is a retired neurologist, but he's a self-taught, self-trained native plant expert, and the garden is almost exclusively indigenous species to this part of South Carolina. And there's 7 different varieties of magnolia that are native to this part of the state that are in the garden. For instance, it's a cool feature and really a neat place.
So he's got all 7 of those.
Yes.
There? Is that something that he transplants? Can you go buy these plants somewhere, or does he?
He got a lot of them from nurseries that sell native plants.
Okay.
But he has also propagated some plants, and one of them is called Stewardia, which covers the garden in April. It has a white flower, purple stamen, and it's beautiful. And he was written up in Gardening Gun about
it. So some of these are more ornamental trees that'll they'll stay 6 or 8 feet tall, or what kind of?
Yeah.
They're a little bigger than that. But Stewardia might get to be 12 feet, 14 feet tall, something like that.
So something manageable. We're not talking about trees that
Right.
are 50, like I'm picturing a magnolia tree that's 40 feet tall. These are something it's a garden after all. So, okay, that's neat. So is that something he just started from scratch, or were there some remnants?
He's had a lifelong interest, or at least his adult life interest in that, and he really it was a breakthrough for somebody successfully taking a cutting and having success with cuttings of Stewardia rooting and becoming mature plants. And he was written up about a 3 or 4 page spread in Garden and Gun about 6 or 8 years ago about doing that.
Was that part of that? You sent me several links. Was that in there? Okay.
It was.
I'm going to share those to the Facebook page if you don't mind.
That'd be
so
great.
People can check that out. There's y'all been lucky enough to have I say lucky. I think you've earned it to be written up in several different publications. I think I saw Columbia Metropolitan and then Garden and Gun. Has there been another round of Garden and Gun yet since you've?
No, we're ready for one.
Okay, all right.
Fingers crossed.
We'll put it out there for you if they're listening. Come back and do part of your wedding. I'm sure they do some different wedding editions and that sort of thing.
We had a good write-up in South Carolina Wildlife in the last year, too, that was a nice article.
I hear somebody ringing. Is that me? Sorry. Very unprofessional. Turn your ringer off before you come into the radio studio.
It wasn't me.
That's right. Don't know who that is. Interrupted me during my important broadcast here. Oh, you know what it is? It's a call from Charleston, probably telling me that my fish have finally arrived, even though I've got them safely in my freezer finally. And that's a whole different story that we can get into of the process of retrieving my fish that I brought back after 2 weeks in Alaska. Showed back up here and no fish. So. Finally was able to put my hands on those and bring them home. I did my outdoorsmanship for the year in Alaska for 2 weeks and just had a big time. So if y'all want to go next year, we're putting another trip together.
Well, it sounds like y'all had a great time. I know you enjoyed it, and I'm glad your fish finally got back.
Well, that's it's kind of the fruits of your labor. I enjoy fishing, and I have a lot of friends that could go out and just fly fish all day and catch and release, but part of it for me, and I'm sure you're the same way with duck hunting and that kind of thing, is you enjoy sitting out there in the blind all day, but it's nice to have 3 or 4 ducks to bring home and
absolutely
have something to put in the freezer. So that's I'm both sides of that coin. I enjoy doing it, but I certainly love having the fruits of it when you come home. And we did a big trip out there. I organized I was there for 2 weeks, and then I was there for a week by myself, just kind of catching up with some friends, and then my friend Heather, who owns a bed and breakfast there where I lived actually for 3 years. She just took the plunge and bought this place, and then now she's bought a second piece of property and was building a shower house, and had somebody come from Texas, a friend of a friend, that's where she's from, who claimed that he was a plumber. And after 2 weeks of multiple trips per day back and forth to the supply house and all kinds of things, I showed up and realized that he was far from not only a plumber, he wasn't even a handyman. I mean, it was bad. So I took a Sawzall and a pair of tubing cutters and basically just ripped out every single thing he had done. I mean, it was painful. Not only the waste of time, but the waste of her money. Yeah. And that's something that we talk about here, is how to find the right person, the right contractor to come and work on your property. In that case, luckily she had not been paying him labor; she was providing him room and board. But I'm curious how you found a contractor who could work on this type of property.
The first building, really the first big project we undertook, was the renovation and repurposing of the kitchen house. Right. And Lisa, as we discussed, my sister-in-law, did the design work, but she selected, and we thought this was the right way to go, a fellow by the name of Lee McCaskill from Camden, who specializes in working on older buildings, right, and had done a lot of that kind of work, and he did a very good job. And we felt like the finished product was exactly where we wanted it to be.
Right. What are some aspects about him, I'm curious, that make him a good fit for you? Because I feel like there's a lot of contractors out there who do good work, but they're not necessarily a great fit for everybody. I'm not a great fit for everybody, but I try to accommodate most people. What are some things about him?
I think for him on that particular project, and we used a different person on Green Tree House, and I can go into that in a minute. But for instance, when Shana was talking about the putting the rod around the house before some of the construction work was done, he was concerned that a 200-year-old building. You could have if we tried to cut a new door, which we did have to put a new door in, that a wall might collapse.
Right.
So the rod was put in to protect against that possibility. Sure. Luckily, that wasn't an issue, but still, it was, I think, money well spent to put it in as a just in case.
Right.
And I think just having somebody who knows what it's like to work on 200-year-old structures makes sense when you're undertaking something like that.
So not only the knowledge of construction, but the experience of having done it and know what can go wrong. Sort of the unforeseen things, which is what I spend a lot of time. I work on a lot of older homes, particularly in Shandon, and to go in and tell somebody, it's half of the job is some of the cosmetics and the tile work and picking out paint colors and light fixtures and making it all come together. But the other half is sort of understanding what we're going to find when we rip this wall open and what's going to be back there. Here's how they built it, and here's what's going to be wrong, and here's what may have happened, and potential termite damage of a house that's 60, 70 plus years. So for somebody like him to have the experience he hasn't maybe done this exact job or this exact type of building, but he's done some combination of things over the past several decades. I mean, it sounds like he's been at it for 20, 30 years.
He has been.
Good. Well, we're going to take another quick break. We'll be right back. You're listening to Practically Perfect on The Point.
Our website is mobile friendly.
This magical technological age in which we live.
Load it now. MakeThePointRadio.com.
Are your clothes taking forever to dry? Does your laundry room get excessively hot when your dryer's running? These could be indications that you have dryer lint built up in the venting system below your home or going through the attic. Dryer fires are one of the leading causes of fires inside the home in the United States. Chimspector Venting Specialist is a certified dryer exhaust technician company through the Chimney Safety Institute of America. Check us out on the web at www.chimspector.com or give us a call at 803-602-5929.
South Carolina Radio Network News, I'm G. Harper. South Carolina U.S. Senator Lindsey Graham is defending Jeff Sessions against the Attorney General's most vocal detractor, President Trump. Here's Bill Zvinsky.
In a statement released Tuesday, Graham defends Sessions after Trump more criticism of the nation's top law enforcement official and appointed from cloudy skies, which he has become more and publicly dissatisfied with.
World's number one
Week.
Good morning. Welcome back to the final segment of the Practically Perfect Home Improvement Show. I'm your host, Ryan Parsons, along with my special guests, Robert and Shana Adams. We've been discussing Wavering Place. And as we went into the break, Robert, we were talking about how you found your contractor or contractors and what in particular about them made them a good fit for not only the type of property, but also just, your family, your style of doing things, and you were fortunate enough to have your own in-house architect and somebody who had the eye for the design. So, how much time are y'all spending back and forth with emails and phone calls and trying to decide on paint colors and that sort of thing? Is that all laid out kind of ahead of time, or is there a lot of on-the-go type of decisions that you're having to make when you're dealing with these older properties that are what, over 200? Are we 250 years old at this point?
Well, not quite.
Coming
the
up
buildings aren't.
Okay.
But yeah, like we said earlier, Lisa has a lot of experience.
Sure.
My sister-in-law in this area. We deferred pretty heavily to her on a lot of those decisions, and she certainly did a good job of that. The selection of the contractors that we work with. Lee McCaskill had done substantial project work, never built a building, but had done jobs for Uncle Julian during his time.
Okay, so
he had some experience at Wavering Place and with us on the Green Tree House, the new pavilion building. Paul Hayes, who's a contractor from Camden. He builds a lot of horse barns.
Okay.
And this is an open air building.
Right.
It's got barn doors
Right.
on it and similar structure, just a basic structure to a barn or a pole barn. And so he was a selection that we were comfortable with because Lisa knew a lot of people who had utilized him in Camden, and he had done good
for
work.
similar types of buildings and that kind of thing. So did she draw that basically from scratch?
She did, and I mean, she had to work with an architect on the final product. She's not a classically trained architect, but somebody with the skill to draw a plan for a building.
So they helped her with some of the sizing, the timbers, and some of the different lumber and things.
I think she basically had it done right, but you still have to have an architect give it the seal of approval.
Absolutely. Did you source? I think you mentioned earlier that you were able to reclaim some of the wood, but anything else that you found that was milled locally or sourced as far as rough hewn lumber, or was it all basically things that you found on the property that you were able to reuse? I imagine most of the framing you had to go out and purchase, the 2x6s and that kind of thing.
That's right. And then we used as much repurposed wood as we could.
As kind of the finishing touches to dress it up. I think the wall, if I remember correctly, there's a bar
around
area,
the fireplace and
around
the bar.
Fireplace,
that's all wood taken from the old Congaree train depot that Uncle Julian bought.
Right. And then you've got an area in the back, I think, that was for the groomsmen.
That's right. There's a groom's room that also has a fireplace.
Okay.
And a couple of bathrooms back there, and then a catering prep kitchen area that's behind the bar.
Yeah. And a big part of that, I imagine, is a nice backdrop for photography. I mean, how much of that goes into here? We have all the groomsmen hanging out over here. We need to have some nice rustic lumber or fireplace. And do you get a fire going in there when you can? I mean, this time of year you're not, but wintertime, is there going to be building a fire in that fireplace?
Well, we hope so.
Yeah.
They're both working fireplaces.
Right.
And so once it starts getting cooler, we have a wedding in November.
Nice. That'll be perfect.
And so we're hoping that it'll be cool enough that we can light up a fireplace and the groomsmen can hang out in the back there, drink a little bourbon or something.
Yeah. I don't think we've mentioned Uncle Julian, by the way, if you're listening, now I really want you to call in and answer some questions about living at Wavering Place with no central heat and air, which to me just sounds impossible. I mean, I could get behind the building a fire in the fireplace in the wintertime. I'm, fairly hot-natured guy. I don't necessarily have to have the central heat, but the air conditioning side, are you saying he didn't have a window unit in a little bedroom
he did
somewhere?
not have any heat or air in the house while he lived there. When we bought it, we put heat in.
Okay.
For the first time in the history of the house. Of course, there have been fireplaces the whole time.
Right.
And but he's a tough old bird.
Wow.
He stayed through a lot of hot summers and cold winters without heat or air.
Did people leave that property in the summertime to escape down to the coast or to Charleston, or were there people there year round like he was? I mean,
I think there were people there year round.
So obviously, people work in the fields and that kind of thing, doing the agriculture. What kind of crops were grown out there?
Back in the early days, Joel Adams' time, he died in 1830. He was a cattleman, but he was also in indigo and cotton, and then eventually that whole area was really big into cotton. For a long period of time.
Yeah, indigo was a big thing around here.
It was
the wonderful indigo state. Wasn't that what
that's
WIS
right.
stands for?
Well, that's wonderful iodine
state. Okay,
but the indigo was a big part of our history.
That's awesome. We got a caller on the line. I'm on pins and needles here to see who that might be. What's coming up in the future for Wavering Place? You've got the Green Tree house built now. You've got the kitchen house up and running. The main house is there as a residence. What else are we looking at doing?
Well, we still want to build up some of the events business. That's our main source of income. 100% of that, any income that we get, goes into the preservation of Wavering Place. And so just, having weddings and events and just creating relationships with people, and that's just kind of what is at the heart at Wavering Place. And so we just want to continue on doing that. And hopefully the next generation, if you're listening, the next generation of Adams family, that they continue on that tradition.
I think they will. And y'all have got a great start on that road. All right, here's the man of the hour, the man we've been talking about. He's nice enough to call in. Dr. Julian Adams. How are you, Dr. Julian? Can you hear me? The man we've been talking about, he's nice enough to call in. Uncle Julian, if you can hear me, turn your radio down. We can hear you coming through in the background. I think I could hear your voice. Are you there? He's calling us again, I think. Hello
there.
There we go. How are you, Uncle Julian?
I'm doing fine.
Good to hear from you. Well,
I've enjoyed listening to the show today.
Well, thank you.
Hey, Julian.
Hey.
We've got Robert and Shana here, and they've just been telling us all about that piece of property you got out there. And we just a second ago, I'm sure you heard we're talking about you living there with no heating and air. Do you have heating and air now where you're living?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
I finally got a little bit. I wouldn't want to go back and live in that kind of heat and air. And
right.
Again, but I enjoyed that. I had a purpose.
Yeah. I imagine so.
I got with the program when I was living out there.
Okay. So you're pretty good at swinging an axe and splitting some firewood, I imagine.
Occasionally, yeah. But I got my children and I both enjoy living a different sort of life out there.
What would you do out there? What was recreation for you out on the?
Well, I was propagating plants mostly.
Okay.
I worked 30 hours a week extra, and weekends and evenings and for plants and.
Tell me Tell me about a typical day. Let's just say it's a Monday, middle of the year. What time did you get up, and what would you do? What time would you have to be at work?
Well, when I retired, when I was practicing medicine, I was in town at 7 o'clock,
okay,
and making rounds in the hospitals and working all day. But usually, I got out there late in the afternoon and did some work with the nursery, and then that was many of my years was when I was still working.
And then when you retired, you were really able to just enjoy.
Yeah, I retired. I didn't keep the nursery more than 3 or 4 years after I retired. It kind of gave out because we just we couldn't make the market. It was some business problems.
So when you say nursery, you're talking more than just what it took to maintain your garden. You were actually selling some native plants.
We had a plant nursery. We sold native plants. We propagated them and sold them and installed them and designed gardens. We had too much going on. We had a multifaceted business that took a lot of energy. And I got sick along the way, so we kind of just curtailed it.
Yes, sir. How did you come to own Wavering Place?
Well, years ago, I used to visit there with my father, and my cousin Adams Hayne was our cousin, my grandfather's family, and we'd visit there and see the thing. And then I came back from the service, and when I was about in my early 30s, and I realized that they were probably going to sell the place. They had gotten a contract with some fellow who wanted to make a golf course out of it. It kind of made me sick.
Yeah.
And so, anyway, I decided I would start investing some money. So I invested some money outside of my practice to make money to buy it if it ever came up for sale again, and it did.
So who did you buy it from?
I bought it from cousins, the Haynes.
And how many cousins were there?
Well, there were about 50.
Wow. You got 50 people to all get together and sell you that piece of property.
They had a majority, and then they found out right close to the time of closing that the old ancestor who died in 1936 had said her other family members who weren't going to buy it, weren't going to inherit the place, had rights to stay there. So we had to get permission from 100 more people to sell it to me. And they all agreed.
100 on top of the orial 50 that you already had to talk into it.
That's right. It was a lot of work for the lawyer.
I bet.
He was a good-natured man named McLeod Singletary, and he was a good man. He handled it for us with ease.
So you might have spent as much on legal fees as you did to purchase the property.
Yeah, well, he was kind. He didn't charge me much. He knew I was down at the bottom of my pocketbook.
So it's all about who you know, I guess, to help you get across the.
Well, he was a very nice friend.
So how do you feel so far about what Robert and Weston and Lisa and Shana have done thus far?
I'm very happy about it. I'm glad they've taken to liking to it, and I know it's a lot of extra in their lives, and I think that they've done a mighty good job.
Have you gotten to spend much time out there since?
Yeah,
they
I spend enough time out there. I come to see them once or twice a week.
How are they?
I don't do any work though, but
Oh, they don't put you to work?
Well,
I was just getting ready to
underselling his contributions. He does a lot of work.
I bet he's got some hours in consulting on that garden over there and letting y'all know what you need to prune or how to keep it up.
Well, I do give some unsolicited advice at times. I think.
Nothing wrong with that. Hey, you built it, so
Yeah.
you can put in your 2 cents. Well, we've only got about 20 seconds to go, and Uncle Julian, I really appreciate you calling.
Enjoy your program very much. Thank you.
Thank you, and don't be a stranger. I know we're going to have Robert and Shana in here throughout the year. There's just so many things to talk about out there at Wavering Place from several different angles, history and home improvement, and everything that goes in. Well, thank you all again.
Thank you,
I appreciate
Ryan.
you.
Thank you,
Appreciate y'all coming in. Join us this same time next week. You're listening to the Practically Perfect Home Improvement Show on The Point.